This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREW and get 10% off your total order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, Jon, and this episode's guest is Mark Holcomb, guitarist of Periphery and Haunted Shores. Full transparency, though, we don't really talk about either of those projects. This was more of a loose conversation with Mark, which is something I was really excited to have him come on and do. I had heard him on the Just STFU podcast of Kyle Conkeal from Bad Wolves and of Doc Coyle's X-Man podcast recently, and just was like, man, I'm really enjoying hearing Mark just kind of shoot the shit with these two dudes. And, you know, that's kind of the fun thing about checking out other podcasts is sometimes it's almost like when you hear someone in a different capacity than you've heard them previously, you kind of get to see more of who they are. And that's the kind of fun thing about those two shows for me is it's them kind of talking to people they know, and they're just not necessarily focused on pushing an album or doing normal press. So you're kind of getting to see more of that person that they're having on, and as well as those two as well. So at that point, I had reached out to Mark, and I was like, look, I'd love to have you come on and just kind of shoot the shit with me. And, you know, through emailing and kind of building a little bit of a rapport in trying to set up the time to talk, Mark and I were emailing when I was out in San Antonio and about to go to a Spurs game. And unbeknownst to me, like, I know that Mark is a big Chicago sports fan, but I didn't know that he was potentially planning on going to that game as well, because he lives over in Austin, so it was only like an hour away from him, and chose not to last minute just to kind of get some work done. And was one of those things where, you know, we started talking about sports, and I was like, dude, we're definitely going to talk sports, because that's the funny thing. As I've grown up, I didn't really have the opportunity to have friends who were as passionate about sports and passionate about music in my life. It's only really been, I would say, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, I've kind of really found people who are into both. Growing up and playing sports, you know, I remember my senior year of football, Toxicity was a big record that the whole team was really enjoying. But by and large, a lot of the people I played with, and in other sports too, you know, wrestling and basketball and track, I didn't really find people who were really into music that kind of used music to motivate them in their workouts and so forth. I remember working out in the weight rooms and stuff, and even during track season, you know, running around with my iPod mini and maybe with my Discman at that point, I'm not entirely sure, but really having like albums like Slipknot's Iowa really fueling my workouts, really pushing me to kind of be more aggressive and get that extra bit out of my workouts. But then, you know, I'm also, as I'm listening to these and they're providing this soundtrack for me, they're also I'm also listening to them as a huge music fan and really getting something out of it, especially with that Slipknot record. Just, the transition that Ross Robinson was able to pull out of the band from the first record to Iowa. And it was just one of those things, like, I really had no one to talk to about that. Or, like, if I did have someone to talk to, like one of my best friends, Jason, he wasn't really big into sports, so I couldn't really, my worlds weren't really crossing. And then it's like once I graduated, I basically found this whole new world of people who were really into music but fucking hated sports. So it's one of those where, when you're able to kind of find your people and you're able to really kind of expose, I guess, more of who you are, the conversations you have with these people are a lot more fulfilling because you're able to kind of pull from a lot of different things in your life. And so for me, it was just really great to talk to Mark. I mean, he's only, I think, a year older than me. So we have that same sweet spot of movie references and sports teams and dynasties and all those kind of things. Plus, while I'll say Mark probably knows a lot more about some of the underground metal scene that I probably wasn't aware of because I was going more down the hip hop scene and so forth, and R&B at times than I was metal, I still think we have the same reference for people and players and musicians and so forth. So that was really cool. I'm a little bit nervous about what Periphery fans are going to think since we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about Periphery or Haunted Shores. And the capacity that we do is, I think, very interesting, just kind of talking about internet culture and so on and so forth. But you know what? Let's stop talking about what you're going to hear and get into the conversation with Mark. And I'll talk to you on the other side of it, I guess.
Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I didn't read what it was. I saw it was an overdose, but I think you got to assume.
Drug overdose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's awful.
Yeah. They took him off. They took him off the ventilators and stuff, I think. They said this morning or whatever, or I guess yesterday, and he was doing okay. They made it seem like, and then he wasn't able to like breathe on his own, I guess. So now they're putting him back into like I guess he already was in ICU, but they're putting him back on a bunch of stuff. And they said that he probably lost. If he's able to pull through, it looks like there's possibly going to be some brain function stuff that's not going to be there either. So it does not look good.
God, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those for me. Like, I'm kind of. It's always sad. Like, everyone kind of comes out of the woodwork when someone big dies or passes away, and knock on wood, he's able to pull through, not have anything be wrong with him or anything like that. But it's one of those where it's always kind of like, you see people like, oh, RIP so and so, and you're like, I don't really know that you ever really were a fan of this person. Yeah. It's kind of clout chasing a little bit, but I'm really thankful that since he's been released from prison in the last 7-8 years or so, like I've gotten to see him a handful of times. So it's one of those for me where it's like, at least I got to see him and kind of back on the comeback, so to speak. So at the absolute worst, I have no regrets. It wasn't like one of those bands where I was or artists that I was like, fuck, I wish I could have seen them.
Yeah.
So
I haven't kept track of him since, man, like the early days when I was in, like at this point, I was probably in my 20s, like I'm 38 now. And I remember going to clubs and like, being fucked up and partying and stuff like that. And like hearing his songs in clubs and be like, that dude sounds like a party. Like he sounds like just his voice, just the timbre of his voice. He sounds like he wants you to go and make some mistakes. And I remember that was what I associated with his voice. And like, I honestly knew he was an actor. I knew he had struggled with addiction, but I haven't ever seen what he was up to since those days. But it just sucks to see that somebody who's not that old, somebody who has a lot of success, who's obviously amazing at what he does, and he's got a following behind him to just to see it kind of fall apart like that, and to see it addiction win again, which it seems like it does most of the time.
I think that's kind of the interesting thing. Like I saw Paramount Plus, I guess, is getting ready. It's so weird to keep track of like what's the new streaming app
platform.
Yeah. But Paramount, and I don't know if it's out already, so it may be, but that they're bringing the Mighty Ducks back as like a show. And Lauren Graham, I was like, I can't remember her fucking name. Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls is in it with Emilio Estevez, and basically I think she's got a son and all the stuff. So they're basically kind of redoing that. But I did see something that like maybe half of the original Mighty Ducks or some of them are back in an episode or whatever, and then a bunch of people online were like, well, where the fuck is Goldberg? But then I was like, dude, Goldberg, the guy, whoever, I can't remember his name, but that dude has been like living a really hard life. And then I saw a follow-up article that was like, he's been sober for about 14, 16 months, I think, something like that, about a year and a half. He's trying to get in the good graces and kind of be a part of the project. Maybe not obviously for this season that's already done, but for a follow-up if there is, and kind of, get back. Because I think he is one of the bigger names from that movie and that franchise. And really sadly, like, he kind of was always in those like B movies. As kind of the comedic relief. But, I think by and large, I just get kind of tired of seeing, like, I think Scott Weiland's a great example. Like, everyone was making fun of that dude. Oh, look at how terrible he sounds. Look at how awful he looks. He's fucked up. Like, this is, and they're just ripping on him. And then he died like a month later, and everyone's like, oh, it's so sad. I was a huge fan. And you're like, well, if you're a huge fan, then you wouldn't fucking rip on the dude like when he's having problems. Like, that's not, I don't know. It's just, it's weird to kind of see the world we live in with the internet being what it is and comment sections being as negative as they are, where sometimes it seems like you get some kind of, I don't know, like points or something for fucking being
roasting somebody at their lowest moment. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason, man, like the more and more I get into my career and the more I do this, the more I distance myself from looking at comments and questions, because it's not really my place to figure out, and I'm there for a very specific reason, to provide music. That's my job. It's just to put out music, and then maybe every once in a while put out a social media post to promote it. But like trying to make too much sense of it, which I've been guilty of in the past, like scouring the lists of comments and questions. It's like you can spend your whole day doing that, and it's not really good for anybody. Like, I mean, people may feel honored or privileged to get a response, but like, I don't know, like it has driven me crazy in the past trying to make too much sense out of it. So I just kind of look at it for what it is and let the comments do their thing, and I go on living my life. So yeah, I don't read them, to be honest.
I find it to just be an interesting thing, because I feel like your band to me is such an anomaly in that regard. Like, I understand bands that have like rabid fan bases. Absolutely. Like, I'm that way with certain bands. Like, Every Time I Die is one of my favorite bands. The band Him is one of my favorite bands. Like, I know a lot about all of those people, but like there becomes a point, and maybe it's because I have friends in the touring world, and I do this now too, where it's like you kind of have to separate you as a fan and kind of pull out like the good questions, the good parts about being an Uber fan, and find the good questions that maybe you haven't found, but treat the person as a person. Like, something I think the moment I kind of realized that is, Atreyu is one of my favorite bands. And in the time of doing this over the last 5 years or so, I've gotten to know Porter really well, like considered him a really good friend. And it's weird because there are times like where I go and hang out with him and I'm like, yeah, it's just, you are who you are. Like, we have a texting relationship and shit. And when we're around, we hang out. But then, there's that hour or so where like he's playing some of my favorite songs from when I was like, 18. Yeah. And there's that part where you're just like, like I still love these songs. I still love this band. But like, I think because now I know him and the rest of the dudes more as just people, a little bit of that luster, I guess, I don't know, has kind of been removed. And now I'm just like, oh, you just happen to be people who make really awesome music and are great musicians, but you're just people.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you're describing is why these interactions and taking meaning away from interactions with fans is way more insightful when it's done face to face instead of on the internet, because people will say shit on the internet that they would never say to your face in real life. And that's another side of it. It's like, I mean, you mentioned Spencer earlier. For the first number of years that we were doing our thing, on a big level, Spencer used to get, criticism of his voice. He had a very polarizing voice in that day. And like, to this day, I still don't understand it, but he would get grilled for whatever. People didn't like his singing or whatever. And then they would see him live, the same fucking people. Dude, killer show. You sound great. Man, you're nailing it. It's like, and the same thing, dude. Like, we put out an album in 2014 called Juggernaut, which was received in a very lukewarm fashion. I remember we released a song called The Scourge, and it was like, people were like, eh. And then now 7 years later, it's like, oh, it's my favorite record. It's like a revered thing. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't pretend to understand it. I don't even try to understand it anymore, but I do know that people will say things online that they would never fucking say to your face. And that's why when I meet a fan, like, or when I meet somebody who wants to ask me question X or Y in person, that's when I can take something away from it. That's when I can look them in the eyes and they can look me in the eyes and we can have a real interaction. And I genuinely love that kind of shit, man. Like I love doing clinics and workshops and master classes and stuff like that because I can have that kind of interaction with people that it's just frankly impossible to have even over live stream or typing. Dude, YouTube comments are a fucking toilet. You know what I mean? Like you can't have any real valuable interaction over a comment section. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter the social media platform. It just doesn't matter.
Well, I think that's like, like in the point I was starting to make, I think that's the interesting thing about you guys though, is I wonder how much of it is predicated on the fact that, you guys are, we'll call it, you guys troll, like even yourselves, like you
Yeah.
you don't take a lot of things seriously necessarily. Like I remember even when talking to Spencer on that first time on that tour, I had made the comment about, seeing the song titles, basically the working titles, in the making of what was going to be P4, and that you blurred some of them out, then you didn't, and you guys are talking about some of the working album titles, like the Land P4 Time and things like that, and the fact that you don't take things seriously yourself and things like that. So it makes me wonder if that's kind of why your fan base is kind of unique unto itself, in the fact that like there's the, what is it, the gent shit posting or whatever, or something like that, and it's got, I think, Misha shit postings, like there's Facebook groups like that and shit, and you're just like, you're one of the few bands where I feel like you're at the epicenter of like trolling, but I feel like I haven't figured out if it's because, like, if your fans are the ones that do it because of the, and I hate to say this even, but like because metal and like the scene itself is such an elitist kind of mentality that it brings out, and like you guys are at the upper echelon musical wise, like musicianship wise, that people are like, well, this is the top tier of this, and either it's everything we love, so like God tier, whatever, let's fucking shit on everything else and make fun of because whatever, and these guys make fun of themselves, or they're so cringe because they're so good and everyone loves them, so let's tear them down. Like you're on both sides of it, and it's just so interesting to me to see that, because like I don't really know that there's any other band out right now that deals with that as much as maybe you guys do.
I've noticed that too, and I think there's one thing too that is sort of tied to us historically. Like, I mean, I got to know Jake and Misha through sending stupid memes to each other back in 2006 and 2007. And that was just part of how we came to know each other, like sending internet memes on MySpace back in the day. And that was how we sort of cultivated our friendship. And that's never left our dynamic. And, the more we do this, the more inside jokes we have, the less seriously we take how we're perceived, which maybe isn't the most natural progression, throughout someone's career. But like, I mean, it's part of our history. It's part of how we're known. We carry ourselves in a way that's like, look, we're not going to pretend we're somebody else. This is who we are. We like to have fun. We take a lot of it really fucking seriously. We take the essential core of Periphery as serious as death. Like we don't joke about band business. We don't joke about the stuff that really matters to us. Everything else up for grabs. It's just we don't really pretend to take that stuff seriously, and we lean into it. Like I know that there are a lot of bands out there who probably don't want to be perceived as this completely transparent just a guy behind his computer type of thing, but like that's what we are. And I think fans pick up on that. They play into it, they have fun with us, which I appreciate when the humor is shared. And there's also this other weird effect too, where it's like they 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 assume that they can do that kind of humor with us. And this is a weird one too, because like I'll be out, getting food somewhere like Philadelphia before a show or something, or whatever random city, and then a fan will come up to me and they'll start like doing meme talk to me, or like start joking about something from a documentary, and it's like it's funny, but at the same time it's like, okay, like I don't really know you. Like sometimes it's a little creepy because it's like, okay, look, And then the humor is kind of the same as I share with my band members,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of not an invitation to whatever random person to come and have that same interaction with you. You know, is that making sense?
It makes total sense because, like I said, having a bunch of friends that have toured in various levels of success, whatever. Like I remember the band See You Next Tuesday. A friend of mine, Fox, is the vocalist, and I had to drive him to like their CD release tour start, and they were playing with I Wrestled a Bear once, and it was like literally the first date of the tour. And the Iwabo camp was like, hey, so the guys in, and I can't remember the fucking band. It would kind of make the joke a little funnier, but regardless, like they were like, hey, so we just did a tour with the whatever the other band was. And they're like, oh yeah, we did a tour with them, you know, like 8 months ago. They were really rad. They're like, yeah, they said to tell you guys, like they were kind of doing that, like where it just like went as far, like as long as you could hold it or something like that. Or no, it was chia, like that. They just kept doing that. And then so they took a tour joke from, I guess that's like that band's tour joke. Like that's their running gag with everybody. So then all of a sudden it was kind of funny to see the camaraderie of everyone just kind of starting to do that, like first day of the tour where they had an inside joke already going, and I got to kind of see the birth of it. But then it was really hard not to want to do it with them because I'm like, dude, that's fucking funny. Like, you know, just to kind of, when you see someone hit them with one real fast, but then it's like, yeah, I'm not a part of that. So it'd be, and I didn't tour with that other band. So it's like, it's really fucking weird if I were to do it, even though I know the background of where it's coming from and why they're doing it, but I'm not a part of that. So I'm not going to.
But you're feeling it out, which is smart. You're feeling it out. And if you decide that maybe, sure, I'll do it, at least there's a thought process behind it. And if you miss, you're not missing by a lot. There's a big difference between what you're describing and like somebody on the street just fucking cold calling you with a meme from 2009.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
but I think that's the hard thing because, like I said, one of my favorite bands is Every Time I Die, and I think because of, and like Lamb of God, even, you know, Doug did those movies, Doug Spangenberg, and he became like essentially the fourth or fifth person or whatever in that band. And, you know, you see all these inside jokes, like, you know, the Shinfo with Etid and, you know, with Lamb of God. Like, I don't know how many people I've heard and say to Randy's face, like, oh, shut up, I could beat you up because I saw you get beat up in that, you know, that documentary. And you're like, dude, that was like fucking 12, 15 years ago. I don't drink anymore. And like, that's, dude, like who the fuck would say that? And that's the thing that gets kind of weird about some of these documentaries is we as fans watch them incessantly because it's about something we love and it brings us into something we want to be a part of. But like I said kind of earlier, with kind of doing this and kind of getting to meet more people and kind of being in the world, like I kind of realized, like, yes, you can be a part of it and you can reference and have the knowledge of these things, but it is really fucking weird if you just start saying shit from something you saw 7 years ago that probably isn't even a joke anymore, let alone isn't even. So you might have watched it right before coming to the show because, man, I'm getting pumped to go see the show when we could still go to those. But it's one of those things where you probably aren't even aware of something you said in that documentary. Because, I mean, let's be honest. How many times, even when you're recording a record and if you're not playing one of those songs, like, yeah, you just recorded the record. I got to relearn it for this tour because I don't remember what the fuck I wrote. I wrote it. Then I recorded it. Now I'm done. Like there's kind of that disassociation at times with things. And I think people just don't understand that. I get it on occasion when people listen to the podcast and like some of my friends will go back and I'll get text messages about an episode I did 3 years ago, but I have no context of what they're talking about. It's just literally something from that episode that either they said or I said. And I have to hurry up and go through my whole Rolodex of memories and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Oh, yeah. That thing from 3 years ago. Absolutely.
You know what I like to do in those scenarios when someone drops something super awkward that I had to do the same thing. I'm like, what the fuck is this motherfucker talking about? Like, I'll just disarm it. I'll just be like, how are you, man? How's it going? Like, dude, like how like just tell me, how are you? Are you from around here? Like, is there good coffee around here? Like, if somebody does that, I try to walk it back a little bit and just turn it into a normal conversation. You know what I mean? Like that, because that's
got to be weird.
That's what I always want, and that's what I feel like I rarely get when it comes to interactions like this. So I try to steer it in that direction, even if it's awkward. In fact, sometimes it's even more fun if it's awkward.
I think the other thing that's interesting about your band, and I think, I couldn't necessarily speak to this with Spencer because I would assume he does get this, being the vocalist and people wanting to learn how to scream or sing like he does and so forth, and just kind of, get the knowledge. But does it get burden is the word in my head, but I don't know if that's the word I want to use. But what is it like kind of being one of the people that like almost seemingly fans and the industry look to be on top of like the best gear, the best tones, the best everything as far as being a player?
Yeah, it's not something I think about very often, to be honest. Like I don't think of myself as an authority, and I know, I talk gear all the time with Misha and Jake and everybody in the band, Nolly, even though he's not in the band anymore. And he's certainly, I look at Nolly and like that, what that guy has accomplished over the years, is really impressive. But I think part of what keeps us sharp and part of what keeps us hungry and constantly thinking about it is just, I guess, is not zooming out, it's just like staying in it and just trying regularly to up our game. And for instance, if there's not problems, but if we look at Periphery 4, be it the mix or the songs or the arrangement or the guitar tone or whatever, is never being afraid to say that, hey, this can be done better, or what if we try this instead? And I think that tinkering mentality, this sort of lack of satisfaction, drives us. And if people look at that and they consider us to be at the forefront of it or on the cutting edge of it, that's very flattering. But to us, it's just this kind of never-ending journey of just caring about what's under the hood. This drive, this kind of an obsession, really, with the craft. And I'm talking about the dirty work within the craft. It's like, it's not just about releasing the music. It's not the big rock star stuff. It's not playing the shows necessarily. It's how do we get all of this stuff to work? The minutia, the shit that nobody will ever see or hear us talk about necessarily. So I think that's where it starts, and that's what I appreciate about the band. That's what I love about somebody like Spencer. It's like people don't really realize what Spencer does in this band. He's our singer, he's a lyricist. He does all the things you see him on stage for, but he's also like a world-class engineer, mixer, producer. And he does all that within our band, and he does it for other bands. And that's the kind of stuff that people don't really know a lot about. And it doesn't matter all that much, because what he contributes, what he brings to the table, is part of what you're hearing at the end of the day in Periphery. So that's what I love, man. I love all the unspoken, unseen, unheard of shit that kind of makes Periphery the vehicle that it's known for.
It's just interesting because, like, I think when like we look at like Christopher Nolan, I would say most everyone would agree he's in as short a time as he's been making movies, is now considered like one of the top tier directors. His films are probably going to stand the test of time. I just saw Tenet on my flight to San Antonio. And even though I was watching it on a tiny little fucking screen on the back of someone's chair, still could tell like the attention to detail for that movie. The fact that you're literally watching something happen, and the concept is that for everything that's happening in real time, there's something happening in reverse that's also basically happening in its real time and so forth. And just like I said, attention to detail and the scope of like the shots and so forth, and just how everything needed to be thought out and planned. Like, I think that's what he's always done in all of his movies. But it's one of
movie? Should I rent it, by the way? Because I've been wanting to see that movie.
Yeah, so I was. It was funny at one point. The Delta sign popped up because I don't know if I've just never noticed it on Delta flights when you're watching a movie, like it'll pop up at Delta, but it popped up like when they were saying something and like someone was talking and they were kind of talking about things in reverse or whatever, and then like Delta popped up, but like not in a very not obvious spot, or what I thought was obvious. And so I had to go from the flight from here in GR to Detroit. And then I made a note of where my timestamp was so I could continue the movie from Detroit to San Antonio. But I also made a note, Google to make sure that Delta isn't like actually was just Delta Airlines, and it's just their like logo or something, like the thing they put on just to clarify that it's theirs in case you're trying to like stream it
Yeah.
or something.
Right.
And not like an actual like keyword or something that's gonna pop up, and I need to keep track of these words throughout the movie or something.
Right.
Um, but that's, I mean, in this day and age, like it wouldn't surprise me if he like threw shit like that in there, like to be like, oh, here's like these words, and then this is, if you put the sentence together, it's gonna reveal something. Like I was like, wouldn't put it past him. So, but no, I really enjoyed it. It was I tend to find, you know, I know a lot of people are like, oh, watching movies on flights is terrible, but I think for me, it's a great way to really get ensconced in the experience, because like literally, you know, you have, or at least I do have like these like noise canceling headphones and shit. So like I hear everything and I can't really hear anything else. And then I'm focused on what it is. Like when I watched Midsommar on my flight back from Vegas, I feel like even though it wasn't on a giant screen, I felt like I was more engrossed in it because I was like in my own world watching it and noticed a lot of little minute things, like the flowers like breathing basically in the movie, like when everyone's constantly on drugs in that movie. And you know, picking up some of like the little nonverbal clues, at least in Midsommar, of like, hey, like this girl went through these traumatic, I don't know if you've seen Midsommar.
I've never
yet.
seen the movie. I've been wanting to see it. I've never seen it. Yeah.
Okay. So like there's the way the movie opens sets kind of a tone for something that's happening, and down the road we'll have to email or something about it when you watch Midsommar, because it is one of those movies for me where I saw it first, and then I saw what was that other movie that the same dude did, the first one, with the guy catching on fire.
Oh,
Fuck. I'm gonna have to Google it because yes, Backdraft. Yes. It's gonna bother me, and I know people are like gonna be like, "Oh, you motherfucker!"
Like, how the fuck could you guys not know?
Hereditary.
Oh, okay. I saw that movie. Yeah,
Okay, so I saw Midsommar first, and then I saw Hereditary, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, Hereditary is the better movie out of the two," and I think I like Midsommar a little bit better because I think it's a little bit more cerebral. Whereas I think Hereditary, if you're paying attention, like I just kind of said with Tenet, I made a note to go and make sure that the Delta thing was for the flight and not some random clue that I was being given for a piece of the. So with Hereditary, I felt like they gave you enough little clues throughout to kind of notice, to kind of put together what was happening. So when the big reveal at the end happens, I wasn't like, oh my God, I never saw this coming. It was like, no, this is kind of where I figured it was going. I just didn't know it was to this level. That movie explores. But Tenet I thought was really good. The surprise for me actually was The Gentleman, that Guy Ritchie movie with Matthew McConaughey. I heard a lot of people shit on it, and I thought it was a great Guy Ritchie movie through and through.
Never seen it, man. I haven't seen a Guy Ritchie movie in a long time.
I hadn't either, but a lot of people, like when it came out, I remember just a lot of people panning it and being like, "Oh, Matthew McConaughey in a Guy Ritchie movie, it's not great." I don't know. I thought it was
for success, if you ask me.
It was a really good fucking movie. I thought, and the dude Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy was in it, and I had just made the comment to someone because my wife and I had just watched that for the first time all the way through. We're like, I was like, man, what the fuck happened to that dude? Like, he was primed and poised to be like the next big like action dude, kind of, and I don't feel like he's done anything. And then there he was in that movie, and I was like, oh, well, there he is. But.
No, so back to your previous point, I hear what you're saying about the attention to detail, and that's one of those things that that like I look at any other sort of medium, right? Like I look at, you were bringing up movie making. Like I'm a huge sports buff, you know, like I love sports. I love every major sport pretty much, and that's one of the things that has always piqued my interest with it. Is like you see, you know, LeBron James or Stephen Curry or whatever super athlete, you know, is playing whatever sport. What we don't see is them showing up at 5 a.m. to take jump shots. You know what I mean? What we don't see is this almost like scary attention to detail. This like antisocial, almost demented from the outside looking attention to detail. And if you were sort of a fly on the wall during our process, I think that a lot of people would think that, or we're just these sort of clowns fucking around the studio who do like 30 minutes of work a day, and don't really take any of it seriously. We're just sitting there making dick and ball jokes, which that happens, but most of it's work. It's fucking work, and it's attention to detail, and it is zeroing in on on stuff that people really don't ever hear about. They're just not privy to. So that's the kind of stuff that I love, man. And when I see a crazy movie like that, like I saw a movie, it's called I Care a Lot on Netflix. Have you seen it?
No, I'm sorry. I just saw a time hop on my Facebook, and the movie was called "I'm Just Fucking with You." And the reason I watched it was because Chino from Deftones did the score for it. It's a weird movie.
Okay.
Not sure if I liked it or not. It's kind of out there, but I thought that for some reason that almost popped the same thing. I was like, oh yes, actually, I just weirdly enough was seeing that I saw that the other day. But no, what was it called again?
When you get a chance, go watch it. It's on Netflix. It's like one of the top movies in the country right now. It's called I Care a Lot. It's got what's your name? I think your name's Rosamund Pike.
Okay.
She was from Gone Girl. But yeah, that movie was unreal. And the whole time I was just thinking, damn, there's just no fat in this movie. Like everything in this movie is for a very specific reason. It's like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where everything is tight. There's no extraneous material there. There's no wasted second. Everything is to accomplish some kind of mechanism that is going to come back around, whether it's minutes or 20 minutes from now. Yeah, I love that shit, man. And I get to thinking, I'm like, wow, these people really sweat over the details. And I think that's just a cool thing, no matter what it is.
Well, I think the interesting thing about filmmaking, like when I was getting other goddamn, I can't do this other side. Okay, so that's the wrong side. So this side, when I was getting this side of my neck tattooed, here in my house, actually, Chris from Chris from Crowbot, they were on tour and staying here at the house, and we were collectively, the band and my wife and I was facing the other way, but we were watching this movie called Blood Sand or Blood in the Sand or something like that. It's a fucking shitty B horror movie at best. But it was on like Showtime or whatever. And we were watching it and we watched the whole thing. We made fun of it the whole time. And, at the end, they're like, God, what a dog piece of shit movie this was. Da, da, da. And I go, you know what? Like, I used to feel that way about a lot of these things. And I go, but here's let's turn it around on itself for a minute. Someone wrote this. This is someone's idea. They wrote it. Then they went, because it's an independent movie, and found financial backing for this thing. Then they created jobs for everyone associated with this. Then they fucking did something. They created something out of nothing and then got distribution to get it onto this channel so people can watch it beyond just whatever. I would assume you as musicians would understand how great that is. Like, a success in and of itself. The fact that someone wanted to do something, they created this idea out of nothing and they fucking made it happen.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here watching it. And I mean, it knows what it is. Like, I mean, that's the thing. It unapologetically knows what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was like, that's the thing though, is I was like, it's easy to shit on stuff. But I think if we really take like 2 seconds, step back and look at it from a different perspective, you should be more like thankful that like, yeah, could you have watched something that was way better? Absolutely. But I sometimes think it's even more amazing that something like the Human Centipede exists.
Yeah.
It's like, how the fuck did you get that? Who came up with that? Secondly, how did you get financing for it? Third, look at how it broke the fucking internet, basically. Yeah. And then to create 2 other movies that get even more ridiculous. Like, it's almost like Tremors added to a level like where you're just like, what the fuck? Like, I think that's the thing is I kind of, and maybe it's because, I'm a year younger than you. We came up in this weird era in the 80s and early 90s where like, you look at some of these movies that came out and you're like, what? Who the fuck greenlit this? Like, Critters. How did Critters become a big budget movie, or Gremlins? Like, what the fuck? Like, these movies are like, were you high on cocaine and pitched this motherfucker to a financier and somebody else? And they're like, yeah, how much would you need? $10 million? Sure, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah, I think this nostalgia has kind of desensitized to us the concept of Gremlins and how fucking ridiculous the concept of Gremlins is. And I just think Gremlins like, oh, that's adorable, but they're little creatures where you pour water on. Like, the premise is so ridiculous. And the movie, I remember the movie kind of looked like a kid's movie when I was young, but it's very much not a kid's movie. Like, that movie's fucking terrifying for a kid.
And then they sort of doubled down on the kid factor for 2, like made them campy and funny.
Right. but it's objectively not for children. Yeah, I
No.
think about that stuff all the time too. How many green lights had to be involved for this like ridiculous piece of art? And Human Centipede is a great example. I still can't watch those fucking movies.
No.
Like, no, I can't. Like, I don't know. I'm weird with certain types of violence in movies. Like, I don't mind watching violence in movies, but there's mobster violence, which I've always found like Casino and like, I love Godfather movies, but like there's some types of mobster violence, like the laying dudes across two chairs and smashing their kneecaps kind of thing. It's like, okay, fine. Um, and then there's like that kind of stuff, like this like Serbian film, Human Centipede, just like violence porn kind of thing, where it's just like I see a little bit of it. Okay, I'm gonna go fucking watch something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, I feel like growing up kind of in the mid 80s and stuff like that, like my dad especially was big into horror movies. So like watching, the campy like Motel Hells and stuff like that. But then I know that's more of like a 70s style movie. But then even kind of growing up and watching, the Terminator, to me, the first Terminator kind of feels a little bit more like a horror film than it does a science fiction or thriller. Like, I mean, when he fucking tears off his thing and it's just this robot sent to kill you, it's like, that's scary as fuck.
Yeah. So bad. Yeah.
And then it became an action movie, but like, that's fine. But it's like, I grew up watching a lot of these like weird horror movies, like Predator kind of was a little bit of a horror movie. And look at some of the stuff like, the Nightmare on Elm Streets and the Hellraisers and stuff like that. Like, I'm going to talk about a mind fuck as a child, like watching Hellraiser and being like, what the fuck am I watching?
Dude, that
like,
shit is still, that stuff is still terrifying. Those old Hellraiser, like still.
I mean, it's also one of the more infuriating franchises because by 3, they basically just everything you've been watching, let's restart, and just none of it made any sense, and we're not carrying continuity wise. You're like, what? But that's another topic for another time. But you kind of touched on sports, and I know in our emails we were actually I went to a Spurs game, and you were talking about actually going to the same game because you're a Bulls fan. You're pretty much just a Chicago. I think you like sports kind of like I do, like where you like all sports, but you have in certain sports you have your team. Yep. But I think by and large you're mostly a Chicago fan. Like you're a Cubs fan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, my dad was raised in Chicago Heights. And I've actually never lived in Chicago, so it's funny. I just grew up with all the paraphernalia of Chicago sports teams in my house. Like it's hard to deny that when all your shirts as kids, it's like, okay, here's a Bulls shirt as a kid, here's a Bears shirt. So I grew up with the logos everywhere, and of course that was my really only exposure to sports as a kid. Was like, here, watch Ryan Sandberg now, watch Michael Jordan, watch. Well, here's the Bears back when they were pretty good in the mid 80s. Yeah.
I think it was kind of interesting because like this is the 3rd or 4th professional basketball game I've been to. I think I've been to like 2 Pistons games, which the last time I saw a Pistons game was when Jerry Stackhouse had just joined after leaving the Nets. And then coincidentally, the game that they played that I saw was against the Nets, and Jason Kidd had just gone to the Nets that first season.
Oh, wow.
So really long time ago, I saw a Pistons game. And since then, like last year, my wife and I went to New Orleans, so I got to see, I think I told you, got to see Zion, one of Zion's first games back in the regular season against Ja Morant and the Grizzlies. And it was really fucking cool getting to see like, JJ Redick and, a lot of these other players I've long looked up to and stuff like that. But then like even, the thing for this Spurs game, like I was hanging out with my kind of week got fucked up a little bit because we were supposed to hang out with Mark from Nothing More on Saturday, the day we went to the game. And then he's like, oh, well, my kid's got state tournament thing for gymnastics. So like, let's do it at the front of the week that you're here. And I was like, okay. So I was supposed to go see the Clippers, which would have been really cool. Cause like, I've never been to a game where I'm seeing like the best players, like literally like the best players in the league playing. Although chances are Kawhi probably wouldn't have been playing and Paul George would have sat like half the game, but regardless.
Minutes restrictions,
yeah. So it was one of those things like, for me getting to see the Bulls was kind of cool because I was like, I live 3 hours away from Chicago, but I've never gone to a Bulls game. And, they're kind of a legacy franchise, I would say, because of Jordan and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I was really looking forward to seeing Popovich coach. Although it was weird because he just basically sat there and he didn't really coach a whole lot because that game kind of got away real fast from the Bulls.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting. Like my wife's like, Bulls aren't very good, are they? I go, I don't feel like they want to play. And I was like, and a bunch of trades just happened like the day before. So I think that kind of puts everyone in a funk of like, what is our team dynamic now? Now that some of the people are gone, maybe like the people that are gone weren't necessarily stars, but they might have been like that locker room spark kind of people. So it was kind of funny. Like as I was watching that game and they were up by like 30 at one point in the half almost, I was like, I wonder if Mark's already turned this off.
I did turn it off. I did. Yeah. I was really excited for that game too, because they just got this guy, Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic in a trade, and he's averaging 25 points this year. And I think 10 or 11 rebounds. And it was a good trade. Like on paper, it's an awesome trade. I just think it's one of those things where you see teams win at the trade deadline, or they come out a better team, but just they're not going to be firing on all cylinders. And I think they've lost 4 in a row until they beat Brooklyn last night. So, I think they'll be good. I think you give them time. They're out of a playoff spot so far, but as a Bulls fan for the past however long, it's like you don't come to expect too much. You just kind of be happy with minor improvements and the promise for a better future. So yeah, my hopes are not too high, but I really was like wishing I was at that game until I saw the score and they're like, oh, maybe I didn't really need to go.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like we left during the end of the third quarter because I was like, this looks like it's going to be kind of a blowout, like not a big deal. But was a thing where when I saw the final score, they only lost by 16. So, I mean, they apparently made a run of it. I don't know if it was with their starters and the Spurs like reserves or what, but like someone made a run of it and made it kind of close.
They made a run. I think they got as close as like seven or 9 points with like 4 minutes left. But then, they just kind of lost the momentum from there. But yeah,
but it's
we should do a game. We should do a game again in the future, man. Like next time you give me a shout, I'll give you a shout if I'm nearby.
Yeah, no, I would. My wife isn't really big on basketball. She's always like, "Why does the last like 2 minutes take 20 minutes of a game?" And I'm like, "Commercial breaks. That's really why." But if it's a close game, that's why it takes so long. But it's a thing where when we went to that New Orleans game, like she didn't realize they play like a bunch of music, and it's the live experience is way different than what you're seeing on TV. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've kind of gotten her to be like, "Oh, basketball is kind of fun." When you go see it in person. Same with like when I took her to a Braves game for the first time. She's like, baseball's so slow. It's so terrible. And we went to Atlanta to go see one of the last couple of games at the TED. And it was a nice summer night. Game was good. The crowd was kind of into it. Like Braves weren't playing for anything other than to knock the Tigers out of the fucking playoffs. And was one of those things where she's like, this is a lot of fun. And then we went like 2 years later to the new stadium. And like, that's a whole nother thing. Like when you get to see these newer stadiums, like, she's been spoiled. Like we went to New Orleans. That's it. Like the Smoothie King Center's a newer stadium. We just went to the new AT&T Center. Like that's a new stadium. Like I think the shithole stadiums we've been to basically are, even going to Lions games, that's really only like a 10-year-old stadium. So it still feels pretty new. So it's like,
yeah, dude, I love that stadium. Yeah.
I think Wrigley's the only old one we've been to so far. And I was impressed with, there's no bad sightline that I can tell at that stadium.
Yeah. My wife and I, we lived in Washington, D.C. when Nationals Park was built in the mid 2000s. And we went to Nationals games like the last season before they moved to Nationals Park. So it was at RFK Stadium.
Oh, okay.
What a horrendous place to watch a baseball game, man. It feels like you're seriously in like an old Kmart, like that's the kind of vibe that's in there. It's like kind of like musty, like the stadium's falling apart, bad sight lines and everything. But I mean, my wife's kind of the same way. Like she can't stand to watch it on TV. It's like it's insanely boring for her. But then go to games, especially baseball. It's like you can sit there, you can like eat a hot dog, eat nachos, hang out, and have a conversation as there's sports happening. So it's like, it's not this crazy thing where your attention needs to be paid at what's happening on the field all the time, but like you can sit there and just hang out and have a casually good time in like an objectively beautiful environment. So yeah, that's how I kind of turned her around on that too.
Well, I think the other thing too is that they've started realizing that they need to give you a little bit more room in your seats so you're not like this the whole fucking time. And exactly. I feel like the newer stadiums kind of have that in effect. So you're not on top of each other. Excuse me. So I feel like that kind of creates a little bit more of a fun atmosphere when you're not uncomfortable, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. You ever been to Wrigley or Fenway?
I went to Wrigley. So funny thing, a couple years ago, and I was gonna try to go to a game in 12 days because that's as close as the Braves come out here. They don't play the Tigers other than spring training. Um, so I went to Wrigley a couple years ago to go see the Braves, and it was fucking miserable. It was like rainy sleet, and it
Mm-hmm.
was like 30 degrees outside. Like I can't
Yeah.
believe they had the game, but we went, and like our friends that came with us from Oregon were like kind of into it, but like whatever. And I was like, hey, look, we can stay for a couple innings, and then we can leave, especially if it's shitty out. Um, so literally the first pitch, Ronald Acuna just knocks one over the left field wall. I'm stoked. Next thing you know, I think it's like the third inning. Braves are up like 7-1 or something like that. I was like, guys, we can go. Let's go to a bar.
Was this the game where the Cubs came all the way back?
So here's the funny thing, though. The bar we went to, like we went to a bar, grabbed dinner or grabbed like a late lunch kind of thing, and then we went to another bar that didn't have the game on. And so last I knew, like, because the last I looked at it, the score was like 12 something. And I was like, oh, fuck, Braves got it. Like, I'm not even going to bother looking anymore. And so we leave that restaurant or leave that bar and we're heading back toward like where our Airbnb is. And we're kind of going back toward Wrigley. And I have all these, and I'm, in my Deion Sanders jersey and stuff like that. And I have all these like Cubs fans going like, hey man, great game, and high-fiving me and shit. And I'm like, wow, the Cubs fans are really gracious losers. Then I happened to walk by Wrigley and see the final score. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, how did we lose that? And I go, oh, these motherfuckers were trolling me the whole, like, my quarter of a block walk, like assholes. That's the Chicago I know.
Oh, that's hilarious. I remember that game too. I didn't watch, like I stopped watching early on, and then I followed it on my phone. I think me and my wife were out at a bar too. Like we had gone out to get food and drinks. So it was on a weekend, I believe. And
Yep.
and yeah, I remember following my phone. I'm like, babe, you're not going to believe what's happening in this game. It's like they're coming back. Like holy shit! And then I think they won in the bottom of the ninth or something like that. Like
I think it was like the 10th inning. I think it went to like extra innings, and they won in like the extra inning.
Yeah, which was like their biggest comeback since in decades or something like that. And yeah, it's funny you just mentioned that game because that's one of the most memorable Cubs experiences since the World Series year. Yeah, it's a great game. And sorry as a Braves fan, but you know what? Your day will come very soon because the Braves are fucking great.
Dude, I mean, they're not starting off great right now, but I mean, thankfully, we're not only playing a 62 game season this season, so I'm not that worried about it. We're like at literally every game fucking counts out the gate. But last season, I was literally, I had a friend that went to one of the championship series games against the Dodgers, and I was like, "Yo, you're at that game? Like, I didn't know you liked either of the teams." He goes, "I'm not really a fan of either, but like tickets are you got to buy them in fours." But because it's a neutral site and they're just basically that's where the World Series was going to be as well, was that stadium in Houston, I think, where the Astros were going, or maybe it was, that basically no one was going because everyone was kind of afraid to go out at that point during the pandemic. Yeah. And he goes, so it was like $500, I think, for the 4-pack, or he basically said it broke down to be about 100 and might have been more than that. He said it was like about $130 a person per ticket for like the nosebleeds. And I was like, do you think they're going to be roughly the same price for the World Series? Because at that point, the Braves were one game away from the World Series. And he goes, yeah, I don't know. But like, we're talking about going to a game if whoever makes it. And I was like, well, shit. I feel like I got to go to a game, especially a World Series. Like, I don't know, like Braves haven't been to one in fucking 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
And my wife looked up flights. She goes, I found you a flight out there for really cheap one way, or not one way, but like to get out there. And I really wanted her to go too, but she was like, like if it comes down to money, I'd rather send you so you can go to a game. And then like my buddy was like, you can stay with me for free. So like I had it all set up, like they needed to win one more fucking game. And then I was gone. I had everything ready to go. And then the collapse happened, and
I was
eventually
so hard for you guys. I was rooting hard. I really was. And like nothing against Dodgers, but like, man, I don't know. I really like the Braves team. I really do. And I'm not just saying that to kiss your ass on the show because I know you're a Rays fan, but I do. I think they have like some of the coolest, most exciting young players in the league. I think it's good for baseball when the Braves are good. Like for as much as people say, oh, it's good for baseball when the Yankees and Dodgers are good. It's like there's a lot of 90s nostalgia when it comes to the Braves. And like a lot of people in our age demographic, they associate greatness in the sport with fucking Terry Pendleton, Ron Gant, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz,
yep.
Tom
John
Glavine,
Rocker,
especially John Rocker. Yeah.
David Justice before he became a white beater.
Man. Kenny Lofton, dude. Like,
no, fuck Kenny Lofton. He only played. So I have a huge disdain for Kenny Lofton because he was an Indian. Because he only played for the Braves for one season. We got him when he became a free agent, or in a trade, I think actually. We got him from the Indians, and I don't remember who we traded for him, but I fucking hated him because like the Braves and the Indians always were kind of in the playoffs against each other. And so it was either like we got knocked out because of them, or we had a real tough time against them. And, like then we'd kind of be, 6 games and then we'd play a team that was fresh and then lose against them in the next round. And, for whatever you can sit there and say like, those things don't matter. But like, I think that was the thing with the Braves. And especially now that the playoffs kind of go back to back, like, back to back games is if you're riding a streak, like baseball is all about streaks and trends and shit. And like, once you start getting confidence and then or the adverse, when a team starts losing confidence, like, man, that just shit changes so quickly. So while you can sit there and say, and say with basketball and stuff like that, like, momentum is a hell of a thing. And if you kind of went to war with the team in the first round of a playoff and the other team fucking smoked their team and had all this extra rest and they're kind of seeing what you're doing and some of the problems you're having, you're now having one day to prepare for the team you have to play, or, a couple of days where they've had the whole series to watch you.
Right.
And I think that, can't be understated, but it was one of those things. I just hated Kenny Lofton. I think he's a great player. I just don't like him. I think it's one of those things. If you have your team, there's that one player from another team. I think the best analogy I made is Kenny Lofton is my Jack Parkman from Major League. I like when I had him, I was like, I don't know. Like, it's great. We got a great center fielder. He's fast. He can steal, he'll be good for the team, but I still don't fucking like him. And then he left and went back to the Indians. I was like, see, I knew I didn't fucking like you. But it's a thing. Yeah. I think the Braves, like, a lot of people ask like how, because I grew up initially in Delaware, that's where I'm from. And then I live here in Michigan. So people are like, how did you become a Braves fan? And it all started with Deion Sanders. When I started getting into football, like I liked him and then, fell in love with the Braves team. And then just kind of have stayed a Braves fan. But it's interesting because as you were kind of saying with, the Bears even, I expected the Braves to be good. We had pieces, we had a good farm system, and we had things in place that I knew we were going to be good probably starting now. But when I was like, we have the pieces and we'll be good in about 3-4 years, they started being good like that first season. They made the playoffs. We didn't do very good. We got knocked out right away, but I was like, holy shit, I didn't even expect them to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So every year we've seen a progression, like, they make it a little bit further. Right. So to be one game away from the World Series, I'm hoping they're able to kind of connect in with the pieces they got, kind of put it together and have a World Series run. But it's one of those like where being a sports fan, when you're loyal to a team, like you're like, fuck, I hope this is the year. And, like, I remember when the Cubs won that World Series, like my wife has a knack for going to bed for some of the craziest, like, championship moments. She went to bed during that Atlanta, New England Super Bowl. New England's done. Woke up the next morning and she was like, so Atlanta won? I was like, no, Atlanta lost. And she was like, how? And I was like, you missed like the most epic comeback I've ever seen. Right. Same when we were watching that World Series game that the Cubs ended up winning. She went to bed and she was like, oh, so the Cubs lost? It's like, no, it was, oh my God, it was like the wildest World Series I've ever fucking seen. So yeah, if she goes to bed early during a championship game, I'm pretty much guaranteeing something amazing is going to happen.
Something crazy is going to happen. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
What, kind of speaking of that, have you ever been approached or have you approached the Cubs franchise or anybody to, do like a guitar playthrough of the national anthem or something fun like that?
Well, it's funny, like not with the Cubs. First of all, a friend of mine, Rob Scallon, he's a
Yep.
YouTuber, internet personality, guitarist, really nice guy. He threw out the first pitch at Wrigley a couple of years
Mm.
ago, and I was like, motherfucker. Like, first of all, like fuck you, you know, Like, God damn it. No, I was very happy for him, but also the child in me was seething, you know, out of jealousy. And and yeah, that was an amazing thing. That would be a dream come true. Like literally, I could get hit by a Mack truck the next day and just be fine with it. Um, but this was maybe 6, 7 years ago. Um, Paul Reed Smith hit me up. I think it was like the day of or something like that, or or some place where I was either not in town or not prepared. But he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, I'm playing the anthem at the Orioles game." And you know, Paul and I have worked together for a while now, like 8, 9 years. You know, he's the head of PRS, the founder, and he hit me up to see if I would perhaps be able to do it, and it really like do it with him, you know, like both of us do it. And yeah, that's one of my biggest grievances in life is not having done that. So that's on my bucket list. And if I could do it in Chicago, I mean, that would be, you know, life-changing stuff. That would be on my, you know, internal mantle of amazing moments in my life, you know.
I gotta ask, how do you think you would fare in a first pitch? Would you be like 50 Cent? Or like where do you think you would feel like how good do you think you could get the ball across the plate?
I think I could do it pretty well. Like first of all, it wouldn't be one of these things where I wouldn't even think about it and then just fly to Chicago and do it. Like if I got a heads up that I'd be doing it a month from now, I would be outside in my fucking backyard or in my driveway, like practicing with my wife every day for hours, like making sure I could just not embarrass myself. Like I don't need to throw a strike, but just like, yeah, don't was 50 Cent the one who like bounced it off the fucking mound or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
one of the people that has done that. Yes.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to be that guy because that would go with me the rest of my life, you know. But yeah, I would make sure I didn't completely humiliate myself in that moment. I think I would do well. Mark my words.
I this isn't a I'm gonna ask this question, and it's not a knock, even though some people might perceive it to be. Have you guys played arenas or whatever with anybody to where like they gift you like the jerseys with your names on them and such?
Mm, man, see, that's another step. That's another level that I want to get to as a band. No, I'm just kidding. We've played arena. The only time in our career we ever played legit arenas was in Europe.
Okay.
It was in 2011 or 2012 with Dream Theater. We went out and we did a month or 5 weeks in Europe with them. We were playing hockey arenas,
Hmm.
European hockey arenas. So like I'm not. I love American hockey. I'm just not too familiar with European hockey. Never saw any jerseys getting handed out, but no, man. Like last time I saw Bring Me the Horizon here in the U.S., like they played, I think Houston, and I noticed. I think it was Ollie, their singer. He had a Blackhawks jersey on, and I'm like, motherfucker, how'd you get that? How'd you get that? How'd you get that? And it's just like the stealthed out Blackhawks jersey, and yeah, I saw that they got comped that when they played in Chicago, and yeah, very very jealous. But if we reach a level where we can do that, that'd be really sweet because to me, that's like tying two of my favorite things together. You know, sports and music.
It's one of those that like I always make the comment because a lot of people are surprised that I like sports as much as I do. And know about as much of it as I do. And I'm like, growing up, like in high school, like I love sports and I love music. Like I played football, I wrestled, I played basketball, I ran track, like I did a bunch of stuff. And then it's like in high school though, like I had all my sports friends and I barely had anyone into music as much as I
Yeah,
was. Then I graduated and I had all my friends love music and most hate sports.
yeah,
So it's like I don't find there to be much like as much as I've done the podcast and like I've actually made the joke that I would love to do a sports podcast where I basically kind of do this, but like I just have someone on like to talk about sports.
we
And
should
it's
do it.
basically
You and I should do it. You and I should do that because I could do this for days, and we could fucking make music references and then
yeah.
go back to sports. Dude, that's my passion, man. And like you were saying, when you were a kid, you had trouble finding this sort of like common ground between people. Dude, it was the same for me. All my music friends, like, they didn't know who fucking Mark McGuire was. It's like
When he played for the A's?
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Pre-juice McGuire?
right. Yeah.
Maybe.
There was zero crossover. And I remember being looked at kind of weird for like following Sammy Sosa and the Cubs and like being religious about that, but also wanting to go home and play guitar and being obsessed with like Metallica and Pantera and Judas Priest and stuff. And then, yeah, the older I got, the reverse happened where all of my sports friends would listen to like Sugar Ray. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck about Sugar Ray. It's like, just let's talk about metal. There was no crossover. And the older I get and the more I do this, like I find that some of my closest friends in this business, there's always that sort of common ground. It's like,
Doc is the one for me.
What's that?
Doc is usually one of the ones for me. Like whenever we get to talking about something, it's always like whenever I think he's been on 3 or 4 times and we always end up talking about sports. Like I think one of the first times I had him on, we got to talking about, obviously the debate that always ends up happening generationally with, who's the GOAT, who's this, LeBron and all that kind of stuff. And, we got onto this thing about how it's easy to say that Jordan is the way he is, but like, indirectly no one had a direct line to Jordan to be like, yo, you fucking suck today or whatever. And like the players now have to have a mental capacity, I think, and we both kind of said this, more than the players from before because of having to be under the 24-hour news cycle. And literally I can tweet and private message LeBron James. Will he see it? Probably not. But the fact that I can do that
Kevin
didn't
Durant
exist.
may see it. Kevin Durant, if you DM Kevin Durant, he'll probably look at it, especially if it's negative.
Well, you know who won't see it? Paul Pierce, because he's too busy with fucking strippers and shit. Holy shit. That made my fucking weekend this weekend. Holy shit.
No, but you're right, dude, because like, okay. I love The Last Dance. One of the things that I wish they touched more on was the darker side of Jordan's career, the gambling and whatnot. And they touched on it as sort of like
but he had Final Cut, that's why they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. They touched on it a little bit. They kind of alluded to it and they went into it just surface level. But there's a lot there. And that's kind of what I was hoping to see more of. But do you think that like if LeBron James or someone, LeBron's a perfect example, the biggest athlete in the world, right? The most famous person in the world. If he was deep into gambling, how much shit we would be giving him on a daily basis.
We give Charles Barkley so much shit because we know he gambles.
Yeah.
And he's bad at it. But like we give Charles Barkley a ton of shit for it still.
Yeah, exactly. And Jordan was just
worse,
neck deep in it, man. And like I wonder sometimes, it's like, how different would that have made him if you were getting that kind of examination?
I want to pose this to you because, like, obviously we've already just said that you grew up a big Chicago fan. You obviously have, and I think now we hear about it because the internet being what it is, but I think back then I only knew about it as much as I do by being so close to Chicago. How much credence do you think there is to the theory that Jordan's father was killed because of his gambling debts and shit?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it, and I hate speculating about something as as serious and fucked up as that was. I don't know. I mean, it certainly reeks of sketchiness, but yeah, I mean, from all accounts, I think it looks like it was just like this random incident, right? But you never know. It's like that's the scary thing about being deeply in debt is that you fuck with some powerful people, and we've all watched enough mobster shows or what mobster movies to know that they can make anything look happenstance. They can make anything look like a coincidence. So yeah, it's who knows, man. But good things don't really happen if you're in debt. If you're that deep into gambling, good things ain't gonna happen.
I think the crazy thing though too is like, as of when we're recording this, the Space Jam 2, I don't think they're calling it Space Jam 2, but the new Space Jam is coming out. The trailer just came out and everyone's shitting on LeBron for having Gandalf, Iron Giant, and someone else. Like, even in the movie, he needs a super team. Michael Jordan did it with Bill Murray and fucking, Newman from Seinfeld. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a fucking kids movie. Jesus Christ. Like, I even in a movie where he's doing something just to like,
yeah.
Like, man, the motherfucker can't win. Like,
I know.
And I think that's the crazier thing too, is like, like you were saying earlier about like being under the microscope and just seeing like how much attention, the scary attention to detail, like these players and people who become, these prolific players, whether they're musicians or athletes or whatever. The fact that LeBron spends $1 million plus on his body, I think showcases that he wants to be around. I mean, everyone jokes that he like gets cramps and all this kind of shit, but it's like, you ever tried doing anything through a cramp and like you're trying and you just like it shuts you down, man? Like, I know a lot of people like show people like with broken noses and whatever from hockey. And it's like, yeah, it's not quite the same, but I don't know. Like it's, I mean, just like, I said with like metal has elitists. I think sports people are just elitist. Like my favorite, it wasn't a meme, it was a video and it pops up every so often. And it was this father who's like, all right, I'm a dead to debate on who was the greatest, LeBron or Jordan. Like right here we go. Jordan, when he like couldn't fucking beat the Pistons, couldn't beat the Celtics, couldn't beat all these players. When he finally did, he beat, a sorry ass. Like he goes, who did Portland have? And who like named off these like old ass motherfuckers from this to he beat an old time Showtime without fucking Byron Russell and all these motherfuckers. He beat like all, and then he's like, he didn't beat nobody in their fucking prime. Oh, you beat Utah. Who the fuck they got? Two people who are over 40, like who, like Stockton and Malone and shit. He's like, he didn't never fucking go through anyone in their prime. LeBron went through these like, and he's like naming like he goes went through the Warriors, like went through these teams, like went through teams that had that Spurs team when the Heat won, where he's like, dude, you had fucking 4 Hall of Famers, all stars on that team. Look at any of Jordan's runs. Who did they fucking have that were that stacked? Nobody. And you're kind of like, I know it's a different league, a different era, and a different kind of playing style, but it's like LeBron also went to 8 finals in a fucking row. Name me another person who's done that other than Bill Russell. Like it becomes one of those things where, and I think it kind of even like I said earlier, where people with DMX, like where people can't appreciate something until it's fucking gone. Like to me, I'm looking at this and like, I may not like a player or a team necessarily, but like, I mean, at least with basketball, I just love watching good basketball. But to me, it's like, I want like everyone shit on Kobe for a while. Oh, he's so mean. He won't pass the ball, all this, that, other. Like I saw the trade deadline meme or quote from the other day where he's like, Jeremy Lin said, Kobe came into the locker room and goes, I want to say goodbye to some of you bums who are leaving tomorrow or something like that, who are getting traded and all that kind of shit. And it's like, we won't have another Kobe because you can't be ruthless like that anymore. Yeah. Like we were saying, like because of the public eye and Twitter and all that kind of shit. I mean, we saw the Lakers before LeBron went there kind of fall apart because of what D'Angelo Russell did. I mean, like there's just shit like that where you can't have that. And I just love seeing players play. I love seeing greatness. I love watching. I mean, Paul Pierce, like I said, as funny as I think that is, fuck it. Who cares? He literally called an escort over and told her, hey, girl, come on over. You can make some money tonight. And I'm like, bro, I think you just literally invited an escort over on Instagram Live for 315 people. And now you're getting roasted in the fucking comments the next day on Twitter. Like,
I hear what you're saying. And I think it's happening the older I get, maybe the less jaded I become. But I used to be such a hater and such a sourpuss for these people who would dominate their sports. And like for the longest time, I was not a LeBron guy. And I guess I'm still not. I think he's an amazing, like, it seems like he's a really great dude, like an objectively, like a good humanitarian guy from all the work that he does on the side of basketball. But I'm the same way with Brady. It's like, I'm sick of watching Tom Brady win. But I'm at this point where I'm like, we got to just appreciate greatness, just appreciate it. And when Kobe died, it was kind of this like, damn, we got to see that dude. Like we got to watch that guy. And you could just flip on any given night and flip on the TV and watch a master do his thing. And I try and relate this over to music as well. It's like, I'm fucking lucky that I got to be alive and learn from Metallica as they were doing their thing, climbing throughout their career. Like I'm privileged. And like, I think the more I think about that kind of stuff and how just lucky I am to be able to watch the greats do their thing as it's happening, the more I'm able to just learn and appreciate. And it's a good feeling to sort of take stock of just the sheer amount of greatness that you're able to watch every single day.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about it too is like, like you were kind of saying, and like we do, if you follow a team or even just a league, like a sport, you see the young players coming and you hope that you get excited about what they potentially will offer. Like Zion is kind of a throwback player of sorts, with his size and the way he plays. We haven't seen that really in a while. And it reminds me of like when people get excited about a band like Code Orange or Knock Loose or Power Tripper, and I know these aren't newer bands anymore, but like I remember seeing Code Orange with Twitching Tongues at a venue here in town, and there was like 30 people. And then the next time I saw them, they were opening for Hatebreed and at a sold out venue. And I'm like, 2 years went by and I went from seeing an underground band to now a band that everyone knows and loves. And that's kind of the thing when you're a fan of something. If you are a fan of it, like a lifelong fan, you will see these ebbs and flows, and you hopefully will be excited about the new crop of what's coming in that will keep you around for long term.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. It's nice to watch a band do their thing on a small level and then stick with them. Like follow their success and be happy for them, as opposed to this old school mentality, which I used to have, of when a band broke, it's like, you know what, fuck those guys, like sellouts. You know what I mean? Like everybody else likes them, so I'm not going to like them anymore. I think it's a really sort of juvenile way to look at things, which, like I said, I used to look at music that way. I used to look at sports that way. I used to look at a lot of things in my life like that. Like, oh, now all these people like it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. At the end of the day, it's just like, you like what you like, and fuck it. Doesn't matter if it's as popular as Coca-Cola now. It's like, it just doesn't matter.
I gotta wrap up here really soon, and I don't want to shortchange this topic, so I'm gonna put a pin in this. We'll do hopefully another one at another time to actually talk about your sobriety. That's something I really wanted to talk about. It's a thing that I think you've been pretty vocal about, and I think even as I kind of talked to you in the emailings before setting this up, that even though we're called BREWtally Speaking, and we're basically have brew in our name, it kind of is just more of a play on words of having brutally honest conversations, or just fun conversations, basically. But sometimes, the aesthetic is, having drinks with your friends at a bar and just kind of being a fly on the wall for those kind of conversations is really what the crux of the show tries to achieve. And I know that that's something that you've been, doing. I think is it 2 years sober now, or a little over?
Yeah, I mean, I'm I guess almost a year and a half, maybe a year and 5 months,
Okay.
in a couple of days. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. Like you said, I am pretty vocal about it. I don't shy away from talking about that. My relationship with drinking started in the late 90s. I spent my teenage years living in Spain, in southern Spain. My stepfather was military, and in Spain, you only really need to be as tall as the bar to order a drink. There's no ID checking. There's no regulation when it comes to that stuff. So it's like, I was 16 and ordering, freaking red wines and beers and tequilas from the bar there. And I may have gotten a little crazy a handful of times in those days, but like, I never like went to the hospital or blacked out from drinking or anything like that. But that era in my life kind of made me associate being social with being inebriated to some extent, whether it was just like a little buzzed or feeling a little loose or feeling a little relaxed. And that stuck with me like throughout all of my 20s and nearly all of my 30s. It's like, to enhance a feeling or to diminish it. If you're feeling good, if it's a nice sunny day outside, what sounds good?
Cold beer.
Fucking cold beer, or if you've had a rough day or shit's kind of bad, it's like, man, you know what? Give me a fucking tall glass of wine or something, because it's been a bad day. The thing is that every day it is going to be like that. If that's your sort of litmus test as to what you're going to do with a certain feeling, every day is going to bring you some emotion which you feel like subconsciously you have to medicate, whether it's enhance or to diminish. And at some point, a couple of years ago, it started to occur to me, it's like, that's not a very, at least in my opinion, I'm not knocking those who do it, but it's like, it didn't feel like a very pragmatic adult way for me to face real feelings and real emotions and real problems and issues I have, and we all have them, and it's up to each one of us to learn how to deal with these things. And for a while that felt normal, that felt sustainable, but at a certain point I felt like I needed to make a decision to cope with life on life's terms, as cliche as it sounds, without feeling the need to color it with alcohol or color it with weed or color it with whatever kind of substance you're talking about. And it's kind of like learning how to live again. It's kind of like dealing with feelings as you're pouring a growler. Is that okay?
Water.
I wouldn't judge you if you did, man.
No. So I found, because I have a beer fridge behind me, but actually, coincidentally enough, I'm taking a sober April. But since I have a fridge, it's kind of hard to. My fridge won't hold one of those giant water things. So I realized a growler is perfect because it's glass. So when it gets cold, it gets super cold. So I've been keeping a couple of these in my beer fridge. So that's why I've kind of also been making sure people can see that it's clear. So you're not like, what kind of beer is clear? Ew.
No, but to answer your friends of mine are like, do you mind if you don't mind if I'm like, dude, I love it when you're fucked up. Please get fucked up in front of me. Like, please be high. And it never bothers me. But I mean, anyways, like, I feel it's like it's learning how to lean into feelings and lean into the momentum of life with training wheels all over again. And it's just really fun, fulfilling, satisfying process. Like when you learn to deal with amazing shit in life lucidly and clear-headedly, when you learn to deal with loss or grief or with whatever kind of negative shit life throws at you, to deal with that lucidly, to deal with that with the same kind of headspace that you're in when you're dealing with good stuff. It's just trying to keep things consistent and apply the same kind of tact to everything in life with just clarity. And that's the point that I felt like I needed to hit. And again, my goal is not to sound preachy to anybody, because whatever works for you works for you. But for me, that's what I felt like I needed. And I mean, to be honest, dude, I feel pretty fucking awesome. Like just a year and 5 months into it, it's like, yeah, I feel great. Now my next sort of goal is to, once this pandemic clears up and once we're all vaccinated, able to get out on tour again, is just to apply some of the things that I'm learning through sobriety here at home during the pandemic out to, the bigger scheme as far as touring and the music business goes. So yeah, I'm definitely very, very thankful, very grateful that I made that decision a year and a half ago. So excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks for taking the time. I mean, I could keep talking to you for a little while longer, but unfortunately, I got to go back to work and make some money. But
let's do it again sometime, man.
Do it again, and maybe we'll figure out like a monthly side thing where we just bullshit about sports. Like, I would almost love to say like, oh, let's do every other weekend or something like that. Just kind of like a quick wrap up of like what's been going on. Because like this is like the fun part of sports right now is baseball's just underway.
Oh, yeah.
Basketball's getting ready to go. We're real close to the playoffs. Football's coming up. NFL draft's coming up. College football's getting ready to go. March Madness is wrapping up. So you can kind of start talking about like where do you think who's going where and all that kind of stuff. And, if you're a Knicks fan, you're probably ready to get another power forward that you don't need. And if you're the Nets, then you're trying to figure out, can you have a practice squad where you have players signed to keep getting all these other players? And it's a lot of fun. So thanks for taking the time, and we'll do another one. And thanks again.
Thank you, man.
So that was my conversation with Mark Holcomb of Periphery and Haunted Shores. Again, we didn't really talk about Periphery as far as like the new music they're working on, or Haunted Shores. I know that him and Misha are working on some new music for that as well. But, I do find it interesting, basically being one of those people who has grown up with the internet and seeing how it's changed over the decades at this point. It's kind of weird to say it like that, but over the decades, and basically seeing how it started off as kind of a thing to literally connect us, to then see what it's grown into between, MySpace really, for me, being an awesome tool for teaching a lot of us how to kind of code. If you really got into designing your site, your page of sorts, as well as even kind of embracing a new kind of community. I mean, like, think about the bands that were basically breaking because they were being found on MySpace. I know I had an iPod, again, going back to iPods, I had an iPod that was stolen from me that had probably 20 gigs worth of music that I had found through staying up late on random nights listening to music and then seeing someone's top 8 and going and checking out a band or, falling down the rabbit hole. And there's no way to get that music back because I don't necessarily remember any of those bands. I just found them, heard a song, really liked it, downloaded it, and whatever. And, we see bands like In This Moment and all that kind of stuff that grew from that era of having that accessibility and having that community that we were able to start expounding upon through social media. But unfortunately now with Facebook, with Instagram, with all these things and Twitter and like the tools are kind of meant to be something different. Like I think Facebook is different from Instagram, is different from Twitter. However, with everyone kind of getting bought by Zuckerberg, there's kind of this formation. There's kind of this thing now where it's like there's not, like Instagram still is Instagram, but now I can go to Facebook. So now you can add a longer caption or whatever. And it's, even Twitter now is longer. So like you don't have to be as concise as I felt like you used to be, but I don't really think they're conducive for building communities necessarily like MySpace and so forth and Zanga and all those used to be. I feel like it's actually a lot more damning and detrimental. As we were saying with the DMX thing, I feel like I see so many people now who are posting things, and I feel like they do it for clout, not because they necessarily are a fan of a thing, but because they can be quote unquote first. Or prove that they were into something before either it blew up or the person passed away or whatever. It's a very weird time to be alive and remember when social media wasn't what it has become. I don't know if maybe giving a voice to everybody and a platform is something that is good or not. I mean, I think, it kind of reminds me of that scene with Lucius Fox from that Batman movie where basically he's trying to find Joker to save people, but he's spying, Bruce is basically spying on fucking everybody, taking away their privacy to do it. And it's kind of one of those, like, how far is too far, even if the goal is to do something good with the instrument you're given. I think back to that conversation with Aaron Thompson from last week where, he basically was talking about how tools are only as good as what you intend to do with them. Like some people could, like, the blowtorch analogy used was fucking great. Like you can use a blowtorch and it makes some amazing things, amazing art. People who know how to use it properly can do amazing things with it. However, you give it to someone who doesn't know how to use it and they're more liable to cause damage or hurt themselves or others in the process. And I think that applies to the internet. I think by and large, I think it's a great tool, but I think a lot of us use it incorrectly, and all it does is cause pain and harm to a lot of us. So I would love nothing more than to get away from social media if at all possible. But unfortunately, I have to post podcast stuff, and so it keeps me tied to the machine of sorts. But so really want to thank Mark for taking the time again, and hopefully we get to do this sports podcast as you heard in the intro and during our conversation. That's something we're both really passionate about, and I think would be a lot of fun. So hopefully that's something that we can announce soon and kind of start the project and see what it becomes. So more on that hopefully in the near future. And if you would like to keep up with Mark, you can follow him at Mark Periphery on Instagram and Twitter. If you would like to keep up with Periphery, it's Periphery Band on Facebook, Periphery at Instagram, Periphery Band on Twitter, and Haunted Shores, as I said, are doing some stuff. So check them out on Instagram at Haunted Shores Official and Twitter at Haunted Shores DC. If you would like to keep up with this podcast, it's simple. Everything is at BREWspeakPod.com. It is a landing page for everything this podcast for a reason. Go over there. Whatever you're listening to this podcast on, if you're able to leave a rating, review, whatever, please do that. It helps tremendously. And our podcast sponsors help us tremendously. They're able to offset a lot of the bills that come with making a podcast. So want to give them a shout out again. Rockabilia, head on over to rockabilia.com, use our code BREW, save 10% off your total purchase order. On Point Pomade, use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. And last but not least is The Bean Bastard. Head on over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up some delicious coffee. Really love those guys, what they're doing. And for the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, I am John, and I'll talk to you next week with Stormy Daniels and Justin, aka the Spooky Babes. We get into some paranormal talk for the first time on this podcast, and I can't wait for you to hear it. We'll talk to you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay. I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you, don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.